What's up, YouTube? Capital G here, looking at some Japanese Christmas Infernoids. Now, I gave this deck that name because it runs not one, but two copies of Santa Claus in the main deck, Dose, and I thought that was pretty damn remarkable. In fact, there's a couple of things that I instantly noticed about this build of Infernoids. Number one was the fact that it doesn't run Reasoning, and then obviously number two, we got Santa Claus being played competitively, which is just like, wait, what the fuck? This is just mind-blowing. But again, this is the OCG, so the card pool is a little bit different. For the most part, the only reason Santa Claus is played in this deck is because right now it serves the purpose kind of like a pseudo kaiju. You just want to be able to get problem monsters off the board. And I mean, if you guys have been keeping up with the OCG, ABC is a serious fucking problem. It's the best deck in the OCG easily, and ABC Buster Dragon is really difficult to kill. One of the biggest problems about ABC Buster Dragon is you can't really target it. Like you can't use things like Harmadique to try and just like blow it up or something like that. You can't use Antra to try and balance it because obviously it will uncontact, and then when the little ABCs die, they'll just go into another one during their turn. So if you just tribute it for the Santa Claus, then you really don't have to worry about that. Now the kaijus are coming to the OCG very soon in their extra pack, so I would assume Santa Claus would probably die from like this build of the deck. And actually, Santa Claus is the reason that you don't run Reasoning in this build. You guys probably looking like, why the freak aren't you running Reasoning? Is such a good card. When you really think about it, because yeah, I was one of those people that thought that Infernoids would be 100% dead without 3 copies of Reasoning, or without like maybe Monstergate going to 3. But Infernoids have a couple of cards in the OCG that we don't have in the TCG that are just like the saving grace of the deck. And with one Reasoning, you're not really gonna consistently get to it unless you run like maybe Left Arm Offering or something like that. So you don't want to chance getting Reasoning, and instead of getting like a good card that you want, something like Ride-In or maybe a Decatron or Card Trooper, cards that can fill your graveyard up, you end up getting a Santa Claus, and you can't really do anything with it because it's only 1600 attack. So it's like, why even risk it on a card that you're not gonna be getting to that much anyways? Like, it's really no point. Now, one of the things in the OCG that makes this deck really solid, like much better than in the TCG, is card destruction. Card destruction is still legal. I wouldn't say that it's as big of a, like, it's not as big of an impactful card as something like, or as it is in like Dark Road, where it can literally just be a win condition. You activate it in Dark Road, you send like 2 snows, a Grapha, a Brow, and like a gold to the graveyard, and you like trigger all of their effects, and you get to draw 5 cards. It's like, wow, that's GG. Even by today's standards, like, card destruction in Dark Road would be fucking nuts. It would be the best card in the entire deck. But card destruction in Infernoids is still pretty damn solid, because if you open with like 4 Infernoids and you card destruction them, you pretty much get them in the graveyard, which is where you want them anyway, so that you can summon your big Infernoids. But then you get a possibility of drawing your other power cards like Twin Twister or Pot of Cupidity, Solemn Warning, 1-for-1, just your really good cards that can also make the deck super live. Now, this build, and I would say if you're going to build Infernoids in the TCG, you should probably build them kind of around Void Imagination. And the OCG Void Imagination is so good. It's really good because of not just Tierra, which obviously is a solid card in itself, but it's really good because of the synergy that Tierra has with Elder Entity Nithis. What this card does is when it's sent from, or when it's sent to the graveyard by any way, by the way, like even if you had like Necros with like Necros Kaleidoscope or whatever, even if it's sent like directly from the extra deck to the graveyard, the second that it hits the graveyard, you end up blowing up a card on your side of the field. So what you essentially do is you have your Void Imagination, you wait for your opponent to like maybe have a card that's been special summoned out of the extra deck. Let's just say they had a Castel or something like that. They already spun your monster back, you know what I mean? They got the Castel sitting on the field. Well, you can go Void Imagination, you can dump a whole bunch of Infernoids to summon Tierra, and then you can activate Tierra's effect, which obviously her first effect says each player sends 3 cards from their extra deck to the graveyard. If you send your 3 Nithis, then you get to blow up 3 cards on your opponent's side of the field, and you've got a 3400 beater in the entire graveyard that is just loaded up with Infernoids. At that point, it's almost very similar to like Future Fusion. You generally are going to win by that point. Like, your entire graveyard is set up. You've just nuked their entire board, And there are actually a couple of more plays that you can do, even if you, let's say that you know, your opponent has an empty board, so you don't want to go like completely with Elder Entity Nethys. You can actually send things like Omega to the grave, and if your opponent, let's say you're playing against Monarchs, right, and they happen to have like an Erebus or an Edia in the graveyard or a Pantheism, cards that you know during their next turn they might try and get from the graveyard. Well, you can put your Omega back into the deck, and then you can also spin their card back into the deck too. So even something like Omega can be used kind of like to just disrupt your opponent, even though you're really not giving, like, you're not losing anything, you're just actually disrupting your opponent. I do find it a little odd that he didn't run multiple copies of Infernoid Tiara, because the thing is, you can use one Tiara to send the other copies of Tiara to the graveyard, and then obviously when you banish Infernoids, like to summon these guys, you can use your other copies of Tiara. So it just makes your engine even stronger. I think when I've seen Void Imagination played in the TCG, like I've seen a lot of people maxing out on like Tiara. Once Nethys comes to the TCG, I think maybe we can start kind of experimenting with Infernoids, like some versions of them. Now, Pot of Cupidity definitely does help the deck. I know it seems like a very big deal to have to banish 10 cards, especially considering those can definitely be Infernoids, and you don't want to run out of those, but there is Burial from a Different Dimension. If you do summon Cyframe Omega, you can start putting your cards back into your graveyard, so it's really not that big of a deal. And without Triple Reasoning, you need to be able to hit Void Imagination. It's one of the most powerful cards, or you need to be able to hit like Card Destruction. So I would consider messing around with this deck. There's also in the OCG, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Elder Entity, or excuse me, I think it's Outer Entity Azeroth. This guy is just amazing. This used to be like one of the ways that people just like locked out people from effects. I know that it says that your opponent can't use, they can't activate monster effects for the rest of the turn. This was one of the ways that in the OCG, Performances and Pals used to get around Damage Juggler so that they could actually OTK each other without having to go into Shockmaster. This guy just blocks out monster effects. When we get these cards, it's gonna be so amazing. But I just thought this was kind of cool. I wanted to show you guys this, especially considering probably in a couple of months when the OCG gets, or by the time that they've gotten acclimated to like the kaijus and whatnot, you're probably never going to be seeing cards like Santa Claus or Volcanic Queen. You're just not going to be seeing them anymore, because much like in the TCG, we don't have a use for them. The kaijus are just, you know, so much better. So let me know what you guys think. It is cool to definitely see Infernoids, even if it was a small tournament. Still, 100 people tournament's not really that bad. And you know, it makes me really wish that cards like Card Destruction and Nethys and, you know, like Azeroth, like, it makes me wish that these cards were definitely in the TCG. So let me know what you guys think. Thank you for watching as always.